Hi, this is Don with Ridge Engineering. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you some changes that have been made to PC Warrants to bring it more into conformity with the METCD 2009. This is primarily for people that are experienced with PC Warrants and have seen it or used it, because I'm not going to explain all the little details about what is going on in the software. I just want to concentrate on the changes that have been made to the software. So if you've never seen the software, you probably should look at some of the other tutorials that are an introduction to the software to get a better view of how it all works. So what's going on? In the past, one of the problems with doing a warrant analysis was sort of the ambiguity of the MUTCD and the wording. And one area that always caused problems was defining an hour. In the versions up until the 2009, it was left a little bit vague, but the general consensus was that for the first three warrants, the volume warrants, that an hour is only defined as data that is bounded by hourly, not by 15-minute or 5-minute or other intervals. So for example, you could use 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, 9 to 10, but for the first three warrants, you couldn't use 7:15, 8:15. And this is generally understood to be the case because in the peak hour warrant, the language very specifically said that you could use 15-minute intervals. And the thought was that if that was the general intent for all of the warrants, that language would have been used. So previous versions of PC Warrants for the first three warrants used hourly volumes and did not allow hours to be defined on 15-minute boundaries, except for the peak hour warrant and also for the multi-way stop warrant, where it was a little bit more vague and it wasn't clear what an hour was at all. And so the software for a long time has had the option of defining for multi-way stops what an hour is. But that wasn't the case for the signal warrant section. An hour was only from 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10. Recently we found out that in the 2009 edition, they did change the language, and this is the section of the MUTCD that is just before the definitions of the warrants, and the important paragraph is this one here, paragraph 14, where it says, for signal warrants requiring conditions to be present for a certain number of hours in order to be satisfied, any four sequential 15-minute periods may be considered as 1 hour if the separate 1 hour periods used in the warrant analysis do not overlap, and etc. So very clearly in the 2009, they have now defined that an hour can be any four sequential 15-minute periods. And we did not notice that paragraph, and we apologize for that. Fortunately, a user did notice that, asked us why we weren't doing that, why we weren't using 15-minute hours, and when we finally figured out that we should be, we immediately scheduled some time to make the changes, and now the changes have been made, and I'll show you what we did. So this is version 1.19.0 of PC Warrants, which is up on the PCWarrants.com support site now. So you can get this version right away. Now the software fundamentally hasn't been changed. It still looks about the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a sample study and show you where the new changes come into play. So I'm going to open a recent warrant study. And this is a study that we've been using because it shows, it has good numbers, and we can make it meet and not meet the warrant by just changing some of the options. So the first warrant that was changed is warrant 1A, the minimum vehicular volume. And this is what it used to look like, where the hours are defined by even hour intervals, 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6. And in this case, there's 13 hours that meet the volumes with these particular settings. I can make it so that other hours, and I can make it so that no hours meet, depending on the settings of the site data settings. So if you're using the urban settings with 2 or more major lanes and 2 or more minor lanes, we have no, the warrant is not met. If we go to rural, which reduces the requirements, we have 13 hours that meet. But this is the old stuff. So now to show you what the new stuff looks like, I need to set the preferences to 2009. So that was set to 2000, 2003, and the software still supports that. So if you haven't adopted the 2009 METCD, you can just use the 2000, 2003 setting and everything will be as normal. So I'm going to change this. Now I'm going to take a look at the same data, but now the screen has changed. And instead of there being 24 fixed hourly sections in the window here, the software, first of all, it finds all possible hours with 15-minute boundaries, starting at midnight. So it goes from midnight to 1 o'clock, and then from 12:15 to 1:15, and it does that all day long, and there's 96 of those intervals. So it finds all 96 intervals. It creates a grid of that data, and it shows the major approach totals, and it shows the higher, it shows the minor approach totals. It picks the higher of the 2 minor approach, and it highlights that in green and puts the other in a dark gray. It finds the total of the major approaches, because if you remember how the warrant works, it looks at the total of the 2 major approaches versus the higher of the minor approach for each hour. And then, so the software fills out this grid and then checks to see if the totals meet the requirements. So in this case, the major requirement is 420 vehicles. So anything in this column that's over 420 will be shown in green. And the minor is 140. And if the higher of the 2 is greater than 140, it will be shown in green. And if both the major and the minor are met, then the warrant is met for that hour. So the software does all this calculating and then sorts all the possible hours that it finds by the met column. But it has to do one other thing. Once it finds an hour that has met the warrant, it cannot use those same intervals again. So for example, here we have from 6 to 7 has met. And so I can't use 6:15 to 7:15 anymore, or 6:30 to 7:30. So the software makes sure that it doesn't reuse any intervals. So you'll see that there's a 6 to 7, but in the met areas, there is not a 6:15. There's no overlapping intervals in here. So this has changed pretty dramatically, and the software calculates everything for you, and all you really need to do is to look at the met column, see how many meet both the major and the minor, and then it shows the information up here. The top of the screen is still the same as before, and if we change any of the parameters, it changes the values of the major, it reanalyzes everything, and it can come out with different hours. Notice that now 6:30 to 7:30 is a met. if you remember with the other criteria, 6 to 7 was okay. So it only starts dropping intervals out if the hour that it's evaluating is met. If the hour isn't met, then it's still fair game to go to 6:15. For example, 6 o'clock didn't meet this particular set of criteria, so it went to 6:15. That didn't meet it, but 6:30 did. So it looks at the volume requirements and then finds all the possible hours that meet. So it's a very complete analysis on what it does here. So we now have 15 hours with this combination. We can go to 14, we can go to 13, and we can turn it all off by going to urban. We only have 2 here. Okay, so that's the minimum volumes. Now, the interruption of continuous traffic, warrant 1B, is very similar. It has essentially the same looking screen. The only real change is the way the values of the criteria change based on the settings up here. But the same logic is used. In this case, there's only 2 hours that meet the warrant. And so this section of the warrant is not met. If I I can't make it any better because the numbers get higher as I set them up. So warrant 1B has a similar looking screen where it finds all those possible hours. Now it doesn't use the same hours as warrant 1A. This is a completely independent analysis, and there's no reason to think that that's not the way it's supposed to be done. So we're going to OK. And warrant 1C, similar idea. Again, this is the combination of warrants, and really the main change is the criteria changes for warrant 1C based on the site data that you have. And again, we can change how that is evaluated just by changing the site requirements. So in this case, we have 11 hours that meet this particular combination of criteria. And we also have warrant 2, which has a very similar looking screen. Now in this case, the warrant is evaluated by taking the total major approach and comparing that to the highest minor approach for every possible hour and comparing that to a graph. So we have a graph, and this graph is a function of the settings in the site data. So there's different graphs that you can access. So depending on the criteria, the software calculates the curve that it should use. Then it evaluates the hours, and it calculates how many hours are above the curve, which is how many meet the warrant. And you can go back and forth between the graph and the actual volume. And here you can see the 4 hours that do meet that warrant. So this is a little bit different in that it does the same type of analysis down in the grid, but it evaluates using the curve like it's supposed to. But the result is it calculates the number of hours that meet the warrant. So that's changed pretty dramatically. The software had to change, and the report also had to change. I'll show you. I'll go to the print, and we're going to go to the 2-page summary. And excuse me while I make everything fit on our screen here. I'm sure that looked very odd. But the software that I use to capture the screens, I'm only using the middle of the screen. So now you can see the report, and page 1 is still the same. Nothing has changed. It uses the new number of hours that it calculated. But if I go to the next screen, the top is still the same. That shows the curves, but there's now a new bottom section. And there's a section for each of the 3 volume warrants, and it shows the hours that were evaluated, and it just shows the top 24 because that's what fits conveniently in this space. It gives you the major total, the minor total. Let's see, maybe we can get this to see a little bit better. That might be a little bit better. So it shows the hour, the major total, the minor, and it shows the higher of the 2 minor, and it shows the volume and the direction. And then it evaluates those based on the criteria, and it shows the criteria in this column at the top of the column. So in this case, the criteria is 500, and it's looking at these numbers. And it does that for each of the 3 volume warrants, 1A, 1B, and 1C. And remember that the numbers can be different, the times can be different for each of these warrants, sub-warrants that are evaluated. So it shows the times that were used and then the major total and the minors and whether it's met. So here we have you can count the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 meet 1A, no warrants meet 1B, 3 meet 1C. So this section is now changed a little bit, and when you print it, obviously you'll get this and if you have a color printer, you'll get the colors as well. So it shows the hours where both are met in green. It shows an hour where either the major or the minor are met in yellow, and then it shows the if neither are met, it's just background is white. Okay, so everything else is pretty much the same. You can get this version for free. It's a free upgrade on the PC-Warrants.com support site. And if you have any questions, just let us know. Thanks.